Does everybody here know the adage, the miracle of life? It's blinding right now, but I think I see some heads nodding, some people just sitting still. I'm going to backtrack here. Does everyone here know how babies are made? Good, good. I can hear you if I can't see you. Excellent. No, jokes aside, we call it a miracle because we know just how circumstantial and complicated the process is. We know that by the time a baby is born, an unbelievable number of hurdles and invisible barriers have been cleared, that a series of events have coalesced and aligned just perfectly. Now, I don't have any kids, but second to the miracle of life in my experience is the miracle of small business. Right? It's a lesser-known adage, I know, but I think it's equally as reflective of reality. You see, while it doesn't take two people necessarily to start a business, the process, the path to success, I think it's equally as complicated and riddled with pitfalls. There are so many external factors that you can't control. Some of them you can touch as an owner a little bit, but a lot of them are far beyond the reach of any one individual person. By the time a small business is born, an unbelievable number of events just have to fall into place. And what do we call that? What do we call it when somebody tries something new and things fall into place? Some people call it beginner's luck. Some people call it dumb luck, blissful ignorance, naivety. But whatever you want to call it, I'm here to tell you that sometimes not knowing what you don't know is a really great launch point for big ideas. And I would know because in the spring of 2009, I was 22 years old, I was about to graduate from college, and I was about to start my first small business, and I was blissfully ignorant. Looking back on that, we can do a quick sort of Wes Anderson-style inventory check on what it was I had to offer the world, and it would go something like this, top to bottom. I had a 2001 Isuzu Rodeo, had about 125,000 miles on it, maybe worth $3,000. I had $5,000 of borrowed capital that I could invest to launch my business. I had a nearly completed degree in English, which of course came with about $35,000 in student loan debt. I had zero formal training. I had zero business experience. I had complete tunnel vision around what I wanted to do, and I think maybe more importantly, what I didn't want to do. And I had a deep-seated love of fitness and coaching. And it was this last item on the list that was most important. As it turns out, the other items, they weren't that useful to me. I was enthralled with fitness and with teaching people and with helping people change their lives through exercise and community and shared experience. But nonetheless, when it came time to sit down with a business lender for the first time, my lack of understanding about that lending process, my lack of understanding of finance in general, it made me a fairly high-risk prospect. All right, now you combine this with the fact that we were a year into the housing crisis. Remember, this is the spring of 2009. And you might not be surprised to find out that I was rejected. And I wasn't rejected by one bank or two banks. I was rejected by 12 different banks. It was terrible. But at each step of the way, because I didn't know what I didn't know, I could just bounce off of each rejection with humility and optimism and excitement about the next opportunity. And the reality is that it took lucky number 13, First National Bank of Northfield, Minnesota, who in some way, unbeknownst to me, approved me for a line of credit. It was a numbers game, I played it, and eventually I got the money I needed to launch. And it was funny because years later, I was down in Northfield making the final payment on that loan, and I found out that the gentleman who had originally signed off on me, he had retired. I was sitting in the office with his replacement, and at one point, his replacement looked up over the top of his glasses, and he said, "You know you never should have gotten this money from us, right?" I mean, in hindsight, the whole endeavor was ludicrous. But I didn't know that. I didn't know how woefully ineligible I was for a loan. And the reality is that if I had waited until I understood the inner workings of that lending process, if I had waited until I understood a financial forecasting statement or a profit and loss statement, if I had waited until I understood QuickBooks, I never would have gotten started. No way. I never would have walked into those 13 banks, learning a little bit at each one and applying that information at the next one and sort of inching my way closer and closer to that desired outcome. Now, in the miracle of small business, and I think in the miracle of starting anything new, danger and failure lurks behind every single corner. You should be well aware of that. But if you spend every waking second fixated and worried about that danger, you will paralyze your progress. And I have learned, slowly and painfully, but time and time again, that progress is far more important than perfection. Now, when it came time for me to find a space for my first gym, I was not very well set up. I knew as much about real estate as I did about finance, so it was a tough start. So I did the only thing I knew to do. I stopped going to class. I got in my car on the weekends. I would drive up to the Twin Cities. I'd park right here at the University of Minnesota. I'd pull my bike out, and I'd start riding around Minneapolis looking for lease signs on any building that looked good. And at the end of the day, I'd pull out my notebook, and I'd start to call the numbers that I'd written down. I mean, can you imagine what those conversations must have sounded like? Can you imagine how silly I must have seemed to these people when I would call them and try to explain my grand plan, my big vision, tried to feign some kind of understanding about what I was talking about? Did you say triple net lease? Yes, I did. That's the exact lease I was looking for. How much money do you have? Absolutely none. I mean, that was how most of those conversations went. All right, but here again, progress over perfection. I remember one building in particular. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was in the heart of the Southeast Minneapolis neighborhood. It was 3 stories tall, big roll-up garage doors, which is kind of important for the kind of gym that I wanted to run. It was rugged, but really well located. I remember kind of peering through the window and seeing this wide open floor plan. I mean, it was everything I'd ever dreamed of. It was perfectly aligned with my vision. So, of course, I called. The broker explained to me that this building was over 30,000 square feet, which was funny because it ended up being just a pinch larger than the 1,500 square feet that I actually needed, the 1,500 square feet that my gym would eventually go into. But I had him on the line, so I said, well, what's the rent? And he explained to me that this building would need a couple $1 million in updates before there would even be a rent, before anyone could even occupy the space. I mean, I didn't know anything. I could not have been less equipped to negotiate a commercial lease. But I didn't have the capital to hire a professional, and I certainly didn't have the time to wait and learn slowly, right? So I signed one. I signed the best I could. And if I had waited until I alone could make rhyme or reason of the different clauses or terms or addendums in a commercial lease, you rest assured I never would have signed one. Now, is there risk associated with what I'm telling you, with the idea of sorting out the details after the fact? Of course there is. I recognize just how counterintuitive this advice must seem to you right now. But I'm telling you that one of my biggest assets at that time was the freedom that I felt. The freedom to move forward unburdened by the knowledge that at any moment I could do something so ignorant and so foolish that I would screw it all up and lose it all, which admittedly was very little. Because I didn't know what I didn't know, I could break all of the rules that I didn't know about. I had no track record to uphold. I had no ego about past successes. And I think most importantly, I wasn't embarrassed about myself. When I finally started that first gym, I lived there. And no, I don't mean that in the metaphorical sense, like I spent a lot of time in my business. I lived there. I literally lived there. Money was so tight that I couldn't afford to go out and rent an apartment. So I took my bed, I put it in the back corner, I built a little retaining wall, had a little door on it to keep it from view. Every once in a while, a member would kind of mosey back there. Hey, what's behind this door? That's just a storage closet. Don't ever go in the storage closet. The building was pretty rugged. The space was pretty rugged. There was a shared bathroom at the end of the hall, a place where I could brush my teeth, so had that going for me. But there was no shower. So I have these vivid memories of the showers that I used to take on the train tracks back behind the building. I would fill up 2 milk jugs with warm water, and when the coast was clear, I would run out onto the train tracks. I'd pour one over my head. I'd lather up head to toe, right? Shampoo, a little face wash, a little soap, and then I'd pour the other one over my head to rinse off. And I did that for 6 months. And I remember everybody used to say the same thing. Tyler, one day you're going to look back on this and you're going to laugh. And I'd always respond the same way. I can't wait. Now, even now, I don't consider myself a great businessman. Not even close, not by a long shot. But I am the proud founder and owner of 2 successful businesses. One of the largest CrossFit networks in the country, and a company called Alchemy 365, which will be opening its 5th location and going national in early 2018. But if I did any one thing right, it was just taking the first step and trusting that in time, I could find great business partners who would fortify all of my weaknesses. It was listening to my clients who exposed big shortcomings in my product and gaps in the marketplace, which is ultimately one of the primary reasons that Alchemy even exists today. Were there bad stretches, dark times when my lack of business experience caused big problems? Of course there were. But it was never technical know-how that got me through. It was the people around me. It was my support network that helped me to take a step back, take a deep breath, regroup, and continue moving forward. Now, this story may seem too specific to me, unrelatable. Some of you might be entrepreneurs and thinking to yourself, that's great, but I need a more traditional entrepreneurial story that I can model my own story after. Here's what I'm going to tell you. There are no traditional entrepreneurial stories. Every entrepreneurial story is unique and specific and made up of a confluence of perfect events. There will be no guiding path for you. There will be no grand plan to help you navigate the crossroads. And in fact, what I'm telling you is that there are no crossroads. If you're lucky enough like I was, there are no roads. Wherever you are, that's where you are. And while there will always be a reason not to start, and while there will always be reasons to quit, while there will always be big, nasty obstacles in the way, there will always be a way. You see, the denominator here is the idea that you don't have to be a master of business to be successful in business. Be prepared to learn, be prepared to suffer, right? Be prepared to sleep in your own gym closet and take your own proverbial train track showers, but take the step anyway. It is worth it. A caveat to this whole message, a disclaimer, if you will. My blissful ignorance was an asset to me 10 years ago, but it wouldn't fly today. I know that. And for many of you, not knowing important information, it's a luxury that you can't afford to take in your particular industry or field. So let me be very clear about something. In no way am I telling you to ignore the details or to brush under the rug all the crucial blocking and tackling that goes along with starting a business. What I'm telling you is that once you have acknowledged the details, once you have acknowledged your shortcomings, don't let them get in your head and convince you that you can't do it, or that it's broken, or doomed to fail, or won't work. There's a quote in the book, The Alchemist. Number one, it's a great book. I suggest everybody pick it up. It also happens to be the namesake of my second company, and the quote goes like this: "Every search begins with beginner's luck, and every search ends with the victors being severely tested." Now, I didn't know what I didn't know back then, but in the years since launching in 2009, I have been tested time and again in all of the areas where I am weakest. But even when you do know what you don't know, brush it off. Embrace some of that ignorance. Let it empower you to act and to focus on what you can control and what you can be best in trade at. And that building, that big, beautiful building, the one that I ought to have been humiliated by, that is a picture of one of my business partners and I standing outside of it the day after we signed our lease for our 3rd Alchemy location in the spring of 2015. We took the whole 1st floor. So, to whoever in this auditorium is sitting on the idea, to whoever in this auditorium has always wanted to try something, start something, build something, but is concerned that they don't have the right stuff, things aren't lined up just right, even if it's just one person out of every person in this auditorium, I am here to tell you to trust yourself, trust your instincts, listen to your gut, and I am here to remind you that the time is now. Thank you very much.